So there's lots to talk about, frankly, in Canada. It kind of depends on what kind of organization you are. If you're a bank, there's tons. If you're not a bank, there's still lots going on, certainly in Quebec or maybe in high cost credit or some of the other things which maybe are more on banks but are of interest to you, such as the discussions on open banking and where you as an organization might plug into all of that. So I turn it over to you, and I'm happy to take these questions. Any topics you'd like me to start talking about? Yeah.
Do you foresee any changes in the FINTRAC and regulations? How many changes to the compliance guidelines for QACNA?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in FINTRAC. They've published a lot of papers. Certainly, there could be some huge changes on the front in terms of the scope of AML legislation. So they've been muttering for a while in terms of, are we going to expand it from our core, which is, banks, casinos, real estate folks, all of that? Are we going to move into spaces like provincially regulated lenders, auto dealers, luxury goods, all of that? So that's still circulating. We don't have a clear answer on that yet. One of the things, though, that I will say is FINTRAC has currently limited resources. Already they are incredibly backlogged, like massively backlogged in terms of the reporting that comes into them every day currently. So to take on all of that additional work would be quite tremendous. And right now, I'm not confident that they have the horsepower to do it right now. The other thing too is that there probably are some areas that are a little bit more ripe for money laundering oversight, and maybe that is something like auto dealers or other luxury goods. But secondary,
Sorry, I just wanted to ask in terms of crypto, Bitcoin is still gray.
Still gray.
Wouldn't that be more necessary than electrical goods?
I actually don't do that much work in the crypto space, so I'm not as confident on what my answer will be on that particular as an AML issue. I would certainly say though that it's not like they're ignorant of this stuff, right? So I haven't seen that come out in any of the papers. So that's, for what it's worth, that's a spot to me. Anyone else? Again, happy to talk about a particular topic that anyone is willing. Yes.
Trying to formulate the question.
Sure.
So with a new industry coming through the
Yep.
how does that innovative lending, like how is there a view on how we should be approaching this as far as new industry? Are there discussions around how it's going to be?
There's quite a lot of discussions, and I think a lot of it is just from mostly on the risk profile. So our firm has a cannabis group, and it touches on a wide variety of different types of expertise. Because frankly, if you're starting up this business, this is from scratch. So there is no roadmap at this point. And I've heard from our team that they continue to do presentations with the banks or with others in the lending space and trying to figure out how to lend to cannabis businesses. Certainly one of the challenges is that we are in a global economy. A lot of the potential lenders that might be in this space are operating not just on this side of the border, but on the other side as well. And so that raises a whole bunch of issues, and it makes, if you did it purely in Canada, there's a way to do that, obviously, but there's maybe some risk-averse mentality within the organization as a whole. But yes, lots of conversations going on around cannabis and the development of that business. There's lots of opportunity, but there's nothing there's no specific legal issue if you're looking at purely lending laws and what governs lending transactions. What you're focusing on is the intersection between those laws, which haven't changed, and then you've got your cannabis regime. Yeah. Anything else? Well, are there any particular topics that you are, anything kind of keeping you up at night, or anything that is concerning to how your business is going, and you're maybe wondering if there are some legal issues that are coming up that might affect that. Any new developments? Yeah.
I just have a question regarding disclosure of administration fees on consumer contracts.
Okay.
So the fact that if you want to pass on any, BSA or any of those fees, does that have to be broken out? Can you charge money on the fee? Like, how does the disclosure allowed work?
Sure. So the basic rule is that all of the fees that you're passing on to your customers must be disclosed. What your question is really drilling down on is, does that form part of the cost of credit, or is it something that is excluded? Is that sort of the?
Just want to know how it gets broken out. Do you actually have to disclose each individual cost, or you can just lump it all?
So the general rule is that yes, different types of fees need to be broken out so that the customer understands what is included. So having one giant charge that would encompass a lot of things won't provide the transparency that the cost of credit disclosure laws are looking at. And the other thing, which does feed on my sort of secondary point, is that some of those fees might not need to form part of the cost of borrowing. So even in terms of your own, what is your APR, you'd want to take those, you'd want to take that out. Yeah.
I'm trying to understand a little bit more the difference in KYC and AML requirements as it relates to the different types of lenders, whether it's a major FI, whether it's a credit union, whether it's an alt-fi. So is the regulation the same across the board, or is there different levels of KYC and AML based on your charter, I guess?
Yeah, there are different rules, and it's either you're in or you're out. So our AML laws in Canada only apply to certain types of institutions. The only exception where it's business focuses, like what you do, is money services businesses. So then it doesn't really matter what kind of entity you are. If you're an MSB, you're caught. Otherwise, it is purely the type of organization you are. If you are a bank, you're caught under our AML rules. If you are just a provincial lender, not a trust company, not a credit union, not any other type of deposit-taking institution, you're not subject to those rules at all.
So is a credit union, KYC and AML the same for major FI as the credit union?
Yeah, the rules are the same.
In or out?
Yeah, in or out. Yeah, that's the basic rule. Yeah, which is different, and I know Canada has come under some scrutiny for that from FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, and we're one of the. I don't know if we're the only, but we're certainly one of a few that operates in that way. Usually, it is the activity because, frankly, from a policy perspective, why would it? You're onboarding a customer. Why does it matter? But it is kind of the regime we have today, and I don't see that changing. So in the papers that have been coming out on AML change, I'm not seeing that kind of change. It's more, should we bring more entities into the fold rather than just, we're going to regulate all lending activities. Yeah. Well, maybe I can ask you guys a question, sort of what, we've got another.
Yeah, we got another one.
Another one. You're my friend. You're my friend, man. You gotta keep them coming.
There's a full hour here. Another question. If you're utilizing an independent agent or a broker for referring clients over to you as far as, let's say, merchants, and you're paying them a fee based on that, and it's based on a percentage of loan, let's say, but you're not passing on that fee to the customer.
Right.
Does there have to be any kind of disclosure to the customer?
So it depends on if there's any other regulatory requirements in the mortgage space. Mortgage brokers have certain disclosure requirements.
Consumer lending.
Yeah, so if it's just consumer lending, then no. That's all the back office stuff. The consumer doesn't see it, then
It's just a sales expense.
yeah, it's just a sales expense. It's only in the more regulated spaces like mortgages where there's been more concern on, is the customer getting the right advice?
Right.
And so that's where it sort of drills down. And securities is the same way. Like a securities advisor will need to disclose, well, I have X and Y relationships with X, Y companies. So I think that it's something that could happen down the road, but I haven't heard anything that suggests that there's been any particular malfeasance, which is why laws get changed, right? So if you get a bunch of bad actors, then stuff happens. If consumers generally feel like they've got choice and that they're getting good advice, so we continue on.
play well in the sandbox. So are folks here mostly from the banking side or more on the small lender side, potentially regulated side? Who's in the room? Maybe I can share some wisdom of what's coming down. Lenders? Mostly lenders, I'm assuming? Yeah, mostly lenders. Okay. Mostly prime, subprime? Sub mostly? Sub? Prime? Okay, so we've got a mix. In terms of prime lending, probably not much here at your bank. Legislation in Canada has bumped along pretty much the same for a while. I haven't heard anything in terms of harmonization of our last remaining provinces outside of Quebec. There's lots going on in Quebec and parts. So everybody, I'm sure, that's operating in Quebec is gearing up for that now. But otherwise, yeah, it's the banks that are the huge focus now if you're in the prime space. On the subprime space, we continue to see a lot of movement on the high cost regulation. And so the latest, we've got Alberta who's coming on board sort of slowly but surely in the new year for their high cost credit regime. I've certainly heard some hiccups on that process. So I know that if you're in that space and you maybe only just downloaded your form a couple of weeks ago or whatever it was that finally came online, maybe that process is going to be a little bit bumpier. Other provinces that are looking at high costs are BC. They had a consultation over the summer that was fairly low key, frankly. So we didn't hear too much in terms of publication on that, but they had it, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them following suit. And really, what we're experiencing is the fallout from payday lending. So payday lending has been on the defensive right now, and we've seen a lot of exit in the market from the payday space. And now subprime lenders are picking up that piece of the pie, and consequently, that's triggering this other layer of regulation that's coming down from the regulators. Haven't heard anything in Ontario on that. So they had a consultation, and now it's stale. And certainly because we've had a change in government, I don't see them picking up this particular issue at any time soon. But they did have it, so it's there for a little while. Maybe they'll sort of take a wait and see approach. But we'll certainly have Quebec online soon for high cost credit, and Alberta with BC and maybe Ontario. Although if I had to guess, I would probably pick another province, maybe Saskatchewan, since it'll be sandwiched between the existing regime of Manitoba and Alberta. Yeah.
So is the focus on this regulation mostly around disclosure, or do you see moves in capping rates as well?
So I think that the only one that has gone on, it's not really a cap, but it's the concept of is it unconscionable, which is in Quebec. Otherwise, no. We've got the cap of 60% at the federal level. There's a Senate bill. There's always a Senate bill to reduce that, and that's kind of this ongoing thing that always happens. The one that's currently out there, it actually did get amended so that it would go down to, I think it was around 45%. But again, it's who knows where that's going to go if it does go anywhere. But otherwise, no, the provinces are not looking to change that at all. It is merely a disclosure and licensing issue, so additional supervision. So frankly, it's not as if this is it's not an industry killer in the same way that it has been for payday. It's been merely how expensive is it to comply. It's a compliance cost, and can your organization manage that cost? I would say too that it is, as more provinces come online with this, and there's more and more divergence from a common harmonized form, so which you have in the prime space, then it really will be quite expensive, because we're just going back to how Canada used to look before I started practicing law, and that was where you had different forms for almost every province, and that there was a lot more forms management. And maybe this is where our AIs will come and help us, and we'll get some more intelligent use of these forms and ability to track, who exactly gets what and who got what at a particular time as well. But I think that will be a burden that seems to be unnecessary. But I don't see cooperation. So I'm not seeing cooperation where the Alberta government is saying, oh yeah, we saw what Manitoba did. We're going to use the exact same forms. We're going to use, and even to colors, right? Like sometimes there's colors that they regulate, which is whatever floats your boat, regulators. But that just to me is something that is an unnecessary business expense that stifles the industry, which doesn't work.
Exactly, and to piggyback on that, I work at a RegTech, actually across the street, as a matter of fact, and we offer a KYC AML solution for digital onboarding for companies. And what we find is for our business validation, we can help you validate if a business exists, but all the jurisdictions in Canada have different forms, and their data dumps or parses into your system wonky if you don't use a solution with a great algorithm that can normalize the integration, right? Mm-hmm. So, a solution like ours is suitable for that exact problem, is that there's no congruency. They have different terms for the business, like just even how they have the form with the entity and the lines, it doesn't line up for someone that works with, businesses or individuals right across Canada.
Right.
So that would be really helpful if they were aligned, but we have solutions for it from a third party perspective.
There's solutions, but it's part of that cost, and I think that while you can lobby to have uniform colors, that's not the focus mostly when you go up in front of a regulator. So you've got bigger issues. We're seeing fewer comments being taken by regulators to sort of make up their mind, and maybe it goes out for consultation. But the legislation that gets put out is often it's drafted with a very specific circumstance in mind, which doesn't apply well to today's changing environment. I mean, we're hearing about all these great new technologies and great new things that we can do, but at the end of the day, I'm sitting in front of you saying, well, the lending laws haven't really changed, and we're still looking at something that was drafted, if we're lucky, in this century. And if we're unlucky, we're looking at something that Nova Scotia put out in Cotton File. So where the rubber is hitting the road is sometimes with these old pieces of legislation. And in some ways I have sympathy, right? I mean, it is changing so much, so why would you draft for those changes? You can't anticipate them. And from my limited experience in terms of drafting regulation and legislation, it is quite challenging to try to think of all the different types of use cases that this particular piece of legislation will address. But nonetheless, I think we're not doing the job that we should be. Lending maybe is a little bit better off. Some of the things are a little bit more fixed, and somebody needs credit, you give them credit. But some of the services that are providing services to you within the industry, and one of them is that I can think of is credit bureaus and where they're evolving, and I'm not talking necessarily about a TransUnion or an Equifax, because the laws were actually drafted generally to address those types of entities. But any other of the entities you might be thinking about partnering today, are they credit bureaus? Is the solution that they're offering to you something that is regulated under the credit bureau world, and does that actually make sense? And I get those kind of questions a lot because we're now working in this data world, and so how are you getting your data? Where is that coming from? How are you using it? And again, credit bureau laws have not changed materially forever as far as I'm concerned. Same thing with privacy. We're also dealing with pretty burdensome laws on that front too. And I'm sure we'll see some change there. I'm not the privacy expert, but certainly there's some change there with globally in terms of privacy.
Go ahead.
You mentioned credit bureaus. What other type of data would be finding or buying that might be under the credit bureau legislation?
It's defined really broadly. So if you are providing a report that contains personal information or credit information or both, you are a credit bureau. So you can imagine all the kinds of things that you might be providing on on an individual that would fall into that bucket. It's not necessarily a credit report with a credit score. It is driver's abstracts, that's one example. It could just be repackaging data. So some entities are taking credit bureaus and then adding in their own layer. They're making it more useful to you, but in doing so, they are now then producing a report on this individual. So that's one of the things that they have to work out. That is their issue, not yours as a lender, but it still is who are you partnering with, and maybe your due diligence that you're doing on that.
We're probably going to start wrapping up. So, any last anecdotes, questions?
Burning question from
Burning
Michael.
question.
It's not really a question.
Dude,
I'm more interested in hearing what other people are doing, and it really tees off of what you were saying about the disharmonization, where let's say you have a consumer, maybe line of credit, credit card, whatever type of variable credit you've offered, and the customer moves from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction where the laws are not the same. Just be curious, what are people doing, what are lenders doing to deal with that? Because it could be that some things that you were allowing in the original jurisdiction may not be permitted, or it's a different type of law. Do you have a switch and you switch them over? Do you send out new disclosures because the laws are different? What are people doing in practice? I was just curious. Because it's becoming a new issue because we don't have pure
Right.
harmonization.
Well, I mean, that issue does exist today, though, when you're if you've got a Quebec, you deal in Quebec. So, and certainly people can jump in, but I would say that issue does exist today. For high cost credit, it's not pressing yet because we don't have that many provinces on board. So we're not seeing people from Manitoba who've gotten a high cost credit loan now moving to Alberta. But I would say generally is that you bifurcate what you do. You've got what you do in origination. They live in one spot, so you give them the disclosures in that one spot. But then yes, you might have to have triggers that if you know that they've moved and there's a certain right that they have under the laws of a different province. I don't see where you can't take that into consideration. Certainly, if you're doing business where someone from Ontario moves into Quebec, you can bet your life that the Quebec regulator is now going to protect that Quebec consumer as if the loan had been originated in Quebec. So that would be my answer if you asked me that question. I think too that issue is also another example of that is where you have the banks taking loans that are originated at the provincial level. It's the same thing. Like it originated at the provincial level, but once it's on bank systems, it's a bank loan. So with that, thank you very much. I will also be hanging around, so if you have any other questions that maybe you didn't want to answer or ask in a more public forum, I'm happy to chat with you and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks.